please consult with a qualified professional for any investment or financial advice. When people talk about building wealth, it can feel like this huge, complicated thing reserved for someone else. Today's special guest is here to change that. We'll explore what wealth actually means and how you can begin building it with whatever you have right now. Plus, we'll learn 4 big takeaways that shape how different generations think and talk about money. All this and more today on Pay That Bill. This is Pay That Bill, a podcast from your friends at Virginia Credit Union, here to help you pay your bills. I'm Sabrina, a financial educator here at the credit union, and today I am with Amy.
Hi, Sabrina. How are you?
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. You have not been on our show before, but you have been a listener.
Yes.
So could you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and your connection to Virginia Credit Union?
Sure. I'm Amy Pridemore. I am the Executive Director of the Virginia Commonwealth University Financial Success Center by Virginia Credit Union, as well as an instructor in the VCU Finance, Insurance, and Real Estate School of Business.
Wonderful. So because you've listened to our show before, what bill did you pay?
I paid myself, and not only did I pay myself by building savings, but I've paid myself by building wealth as well.
I love that. We do get a lot of questions about wealth building. And if you have a question, you can always send it to us at PayThatBill@vacu.org. So, Amy, you work with our young adult college community, and you get this question a lot.
Yeah.
And it is, how do I begin building wealth?
Oftentimes we talk about, so I teach a general education personal finance class, which is really exciting because I can talk to students of all majors. And so one of the things when we talk in that class about building wealth, I say, did you ever hear the phrase, I put my money in the mattress, under the mattress? And we talk about how inflation works and how if you're putting your money under the mattress, it's worth less today than it was. It will be worth less tomorrow than it is today. And so essentially, unless we are making more on our money through interest or investments, then essentially we're losing money to inflation. So the only way that you're going to be able to build wealth is to put that in an account that's going to make money for you. So making that money work for you rather than the opposite way around.
That's excellent. So we want to talk about what wealth is exactly. You and I are both millennials.
Yep.
I think we both have boomer parents.
Yes.
I work a lot with our senior community and with different financial education classes out and about, but you get to work with our youngest adults, if you will.
Yeah.
So when it comes to a young person's perception, what is wealth to them?
So we actually talk about that as well. What is the difference between being rich versus wealthy? That's one of the concepts in The Psychology of Money, which is a great book. I recommend anybody read that if they haven't done that before. But, sometimes you could see somebody who looks rich. They drive a really nice car. They have a Rolex. They have on, a nice suit and tie, and they have it all together. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wealthy. Just because you have material things doesn't mean that you have built wealth behind the scenes. So I like to tell students that wealth is what people can't see, right? That is the total of your checking accounts, your savings accounts, your assets that you have. One day when they all buy homes, they're building wealth in their homes through the equity in their houses, retirement accounts, brokerage accounts. These are all ways that students can build wealth. And we really encourage them to start as early as they possibly can because time is the best thing that they have on their side.
You mentioned that wealth is the things that people can't see. I always like again, being a millennial, we're on social media. I always like the little blogs that say how does wealth whisper, if you will? And that's how we kind of present ourselves on the outside, not necessarily just how we kind of present ourselves internally. But when it comes to the building part of it or establishing oneself, we kind of see ourselves in a world where we love that instant gratification. In your experience in working with college-age students, do you see or do you find that there is this instant gratification that they're seeking when it comes to building that wealth or establishing themselves financially?
Absolutely. When you talk to a student, the first thing when they come to the Financial Success Center, they always say, well, how can I invest? what are the basics of investing? Because it's the fun topic that you hear on TikTok. People can make so much money by day trading and doing all of these things. And it's really, how do you put your house in order first, right? How much debt do you have? Do you have a liquid savings account set up? And then we can start talking about that investing piece. But when we talk about investing, especially at the Financial Success Center, we're looking at our long-term returns. We're not looking for the quick dollar that you can make because a stock jumps overnight, but we're really just looking at continually putting a small amount of money into an account that can grow over time without having to go, buy and sell and trade all of the time.
Right. So the big picture is like, it's a long game. It's not, you're not going to put your money into the stock market tonight and then next week you're going to be like a millionaire.
Absolutely.
Even though there's a perception, if you will, with social media and things like that. Now, going back to like our parents' generation, there was this sense of you had to know a guy, if you will, to invest. So what are some ways that our younger generations or younger adults who are looking to find ways to get started, how can they go about it now that we've kind of have that autonomy in front of us?
Yeah. Actually, I remember when I was a kid, I'm sure you remember as well too, we had a computer in the basement and my dad would follow the stock ticker on the computer and he'd say, I have to call my broker to get this done, right? But now, in today's day and age, we have removed the barriers. So investing is accessible to anybody of any age, which is really fantastic. You have so many different platforms and brokerage accounts and firms that are willing, that have very low fees and have very low entry, access to entry is what I'm trying to say, so that students could get started investing.
Now, if someone is kind of like a little apprehensive about getting right into stocks, or maybe they're still learning the ins and outs of how that works, you mentioned earlier when we talked about what bill you paid yourself. How can paying yourself first, if you will, be a way to start building that wealth when you are starting out financially?
Absolutely. You have to look at your risk tolerance, because we do have a lot of students who come from backgrounds that we call first-generation wealth builders. So they have families who haven't invested in the stock market before and honestly are a bit afraid, because they're afraid that they would be able to lose all of their money if they put money in the stock market.
Right.
So you have to assess the risk tolerance of the student and the situation. And we recommend now, with a high yield savings account with interest rates what they are, you can usually get anywhere from 3 to 4%, which is a pretty good rate for a savings account. So I recommend that students start with those first to make sure that they have liquid savings. They're earning a pretty good chunk of change to at least meet inflation, ideally, in a perfect world, and not lose money on that. And then once they get a comfortability with that they can move on to a different type of brokerage account. We are recommending that a lot of our students potentially look into Roth IRAs, which is an individual retirement account that has some tax benefits for younger adults. And so that might be a way that they get started investing instead of having to learn all of the ins and outs. And I actually call it the really kind of scary stuff. What's the earnings per share? And is this company going to do really well? You could look at an ETF or an exchange traded fund and really play the long game with that.
We talked about, what is realistic. We have a lot of students and young adults with social media and that instant gratification part of it. We talked about things being more of a long term, but you mentioned having liquid savings. When I'm in the community, even us older adults sometimes think about paying yourself first as, well, I did pay myself first because I have X amount percentage out of my paycheck going into my IRA account. Paying yourself first really is also about having that access to savings in case the unexpected happens. If your car breaks down or the cost of gas goes up, or if you don't have the money on hand for something that you actually need. So how can paying yourself first be a way of building wealth when it comes to preparing for the unexpected?
Yeah. I tell my students there's the Professor Pridemore way of savings that technically you think about it in two different steps. And then there's your typical recommendation that people talk about with emergency savings. So for a student, as I'm sure you're aware, the 3 to 6 month rule is that you should have 3 to 6 months of savings, liquid savings, that if you lose your job or
Right.
anything happens, that you would be able to live on those expenses or that money that you have saved for those 3 to 6 months. As a college student, that can feel really intimidating, and they don't have regular income either. So we talk about them saving $500 to $1,000 in a high yield savings account, so that they have access to that. If they bust a tire on their car, or their cat gets sick and they have to take it to the vet, or they have an medical emergency that they need to go to, $500 to $1,000 typically covers those expenses for college students. So that's where we encourage them to start. And then once they build that foundation, then they can continue to grow on to the higher dollar values that make them feel a little bit more secure. But that's one of the ways that, if you have those liquid savings, then it doesn't feel as scary when something happens, that you do have a safety net. You're not relying on credit cards. You're not relying on a family or a friend to get you through those hard times. And that's a great way to build wealth when you're not going into debt for emergencies.
I love that. And, we want to make sure that we have access, like quick access to that money. Like
absolutely.
if your car's broken down on the side of the road, you're not going to go log into your investment account and transfer money
exactly.
over and then
right.
pay fees and
right.
taxes and
right.
all of those things.
Right.
Now, we talked a little bit about maybe using money market accounts or high yield savings.
Yes.
I think they get a little confused
Sure.
sometimes of the difference between a high yield savings, money market versus like a savings certificate. Listeners, if you have listened to, I think it was our saving goal episode where I talked about the importance of like a high yield savings. I love it because it's making the money that you already have work for you by earning more returns. So can we dive a little bit into the flexibility of having a money market or another various type of high yield savings so that you can make that $500 to $1,000 work for you?
So a lot of times with money market accounts versus a high yield savings, sometimes they require a minimum balance. So sometimes that can be $5,000 to $10,000 depending on what the financial institution is. But most high yield savings don't necessarily have that minimum balance requirement.
Right.
Now on the flip side, you mentioned savings certificates, or what we call CDs, certificates of deposit, and those are more time bound. So when you think about, let's use a car, for example, that I want to buy a car in X amount of years or X amount of months even, that I know that I want this money to be safe. I can put it in a CD and I know that I can get that out within that specific time frame. So if that's a year, I know how much money and interest I'm going to get on that amount of money for the next year. And then I know I can't touch it either, because I don't know about you, but sometimes when I see money and I have easy access to it,
we're going to
really,
spend it.
It's really easy to pull that out
It
for
is.
something that we don't necessarily need right away.
I think it's important to have multiple savings
Absolutely,
accounts.
yeah.
Like you mentioned, like if you can see the balance, it's more tempting to pull it. And we have to be better about defining what an emergency is. My husband and I started building our savings together, specifically around saving for a down payment for our house. Like we had to separate our savings accounts in a way of like, this money is for emergencies. This money is for our down payment. This is for vacation, whatever the case is, so that you can identify it. But that down payment money that we had set aside because we knew we needed it, I made it so hard to get to. Like, I didn't want an ATM card to it. I didn't want the statement coming to me. Like, I wanted it to be out of sight, out of mind, so that I knew it was kind of like a barrier or tricking myself to keeping it there.
Absolutely. It is a fun little trick to have a high yield savings that maybe isn't with your typical bank, because then oftentimes it takes 1 to 2 business days to get that transferred over. So sometimes when you put money in your high yield savings, it defers it for a little bit. It's harder to get to.
We love little tricks to keep us in line, and I call them little speed bumps, if you will. Now, there's one other like sneaky way of building wealth and saving money for the future. And, if you are a college student or, graduation is coming up this week, if you're starting to land those first jobs and you're looking at what they call a health savings account, how can that be a little bit of a, not necessarily unconventional way, but just a creative way of saving some money for retirement?
Yeah, I really like health savings accounts, and I'm also an advocate for a flexible spending account, which they're similar but different. In the what you're talking about with a high health savings account, we've talked about high yield too much today. It's on my mind. But with a health savings account, essentially you have to have a high deductible health plan. So you could look through that with your employer when these students graduate and they go get their first jobs. And if they want to, that means that we take pre-tax money and put it into the health savings account. And then once it hits a certain point, then that money can be invested and they can choose the portfolio and the diversification and the assets that it is invested into. So that is one way for them to use or to save that money. It doesn't, unlike a flexible spending account that has to be used, it's a use it or lose it account that, has to be done at the end of every year. A health savings will live as long as the individual keeps that account open and keeps the balance there. So that's one way that they can build wealth and use it for medical expenses if they need to, but also they could let it sit there and let it accumulate for medical expenses later on down the road.
I love a health savings account, and they follow you from employer to employer.
Yes.
I actually used mine, I want to say a few years ago, and I knew it was going to be like a monthly expense, and I actually bumped up my contribution so that I could still save but still be able to use the money that I was contributing for whatever I needed it for during that time. So it was a great way to utilize that pre-tax money. Again, just making your money work for you as best as we can in the smallest and biggest ways.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people that use them specifically for they know their children are going to have braces. So in 5 years, they're going to put X amount of dollars into their health savings account and let that money continue to grow and compound on each other so that they can then have more money to pay for the braces later on.
Yeah, I used mine on Invisalign because I didn't listen to my mom when I was in high school about wearing that retainer. Yep. She said it was expensive. I did not realize.
Yes.
Building wealth and making your money work for you can feel easy, but it can still be complicated, especially as we go across generation to generation. I just mentioned, my mom and, we grew up in similar households where our parents, kind of taught us some stuff, but things change, times change. So we wanted to kind of sit down and have a conversation amongst different generations about money and building wealth. So Amy, you actually sat down with a group. Yeah. We're going to switch over to that here shortly. But we're going to talk about different strategies about saving and building wealth from different types of perspectives. So I'm excited to have you to sit down on this end of it, but we are excited to turn things over to you in our group discussion in our second half.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting.
Thank you, Amy, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. This is Amy from VCU's Financial Success Center by Virginia Credit Union. I'm sitting down with a small group of folks today to discuss the nuances and intricacies of having productive conversations about money. Before we get started, I'd like everyone to please introduce themselves and provide a little bit of background about yourself as well. So Jason, let's start it off with you.
Yeah, so my name is Jason. I was born and raised in Spain, and I'm about to graduate from VCU. I have an entrepreneurship side of me where I do photography and videography, and then in the corporate world, I do more of the digital marketing, social media side of things.
My name's Mahan Meridian. I'm a senior at Virginia Commonwealth University, graduating in a few days. Super excited. I'm a financial technology major, and after university, I plan on working in financial planning and wealth management.
My name is Angela Agee. I'm a senior marketing manager here at Virginia Credit Union. I also graduated from VCU a while ago, but I've been in various fields in the marketing industry ever since.
Fantastic. Well, I am going to throw an icebreaker question out here for us to start things off. So growing up, what topics about money were considered off limits or taboo? And how do you feel those early norms still influence the way you talk about finances today? Angela, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we didn't talk about money just flat out. I never had conversations with my parents about money until I was probably out of school. And then maybe I knew what their salaries were or about how much they made. We certainly didn't talk about it amongst like friend groups, and really probably still don't, just because friends in the same age bracket, we just don't have money conversations and talk about money woes or,
Sure.
or anything like that. It always felt a little taboo to talk money, whether it was with family or with friends. And I feel like when I do have conversations with younger generations, they're a little more open about it. They're certainly open to asking me
Sure.
about anything money related, whether it's salary or credit card debt. So, and maybe that's a good thing that people are opening up a little bit more and having more honest conversations instead of making it a taboo subject.
Absolutely. There's definitely a movement, especially on social media, that I'm sure you guys have seen as well, about salary transparency and how much are people actually making to make it feel a little less scary to talk about. Are there any other trends that maybe you guys have seen as well?
For me personally, kind of on the same note as you, I feel like growing up, I didn't talk about money at all. And I come from a family where like money was a very big hardship. And growing up, I didn't really see or feel that way till I kind of look back nowadays when I'm like 22 years old. I think how it affected me is definitely like, I definitely struggle a lot nowadays, like asking for help, or if I'm struggling with something, if I got to get something paid, I kind of just take it on by myself completely. But it's definitely come to the time now where I've gotten more accustomed to being open, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think similar to what everyone just said, I think talking actual numbers between me and my family was almost sacrilegious growing up. I never knew my parents' income, what debt they had, what expenses they had, and if I had a big expense that they were providing for, I never knew how much it costed. No matter how many times I asked, I was a very curious kid growing up. I was always asking my dad, like, how much do you make? How much do other people make? And he never told me. I think the curiosity came from a good place. I was just trying to figure out how the world worked, and I think similarly to me, a lot of kids are curious growing up and trying to figure stuff out like that. But I think it's very common for parents not to want to talk about stuff like that. And I think that strays away kids from having those conversations with their peers. And that's maybe one of the reasons why there's a gap between the level of financial literacy kids in their teens should have and what they do actually have. But I think now you said there's trends where kids are feeling more open about talking about those things. I definitely do see that. Me and my friends are completely comfortable talking about it, whereas my parents, they would have never told me a single thing.
So as a takeaway, I think that we would all agree that those early conversations, or maybe even the lack thereof, have really had quite an influence on our lives going forward. So my first question after the icebreaker, when you think about the financial lessons that you learned growing up, what's one experience that shaped your relationship with money, and how do you share that story today without comparing it to somebody else's? Mahan, we're going to start with you.
I want to give praise to a lot of experiences, but the one I have to give the most praise is my first job. For some context, I was 15 years old. It was summertime and I needed some money, so I started working at a local moving company. I hadn't got introduced to the gym at that time yet, so moving big furniture, especially those electric couches, if you've never moved one, I'm telling you right now, they're so dang heavy. I definitely thought in many situations where breaking my back was definitely a possibility. So very hard summer, and during that time, all my friends are hanging out and they're, playing soccer, all things that I would have much rather been doing. And I think what that job and having that first job taught me was, before I had that job, I mostly thought of money in terms of what it can buy. And after I realized what it really costs to earn money and the effort that people have to put in to earn $12, $15. And I think it gave me perspective, because you never know what someone has done to earn their fair share. And I think that that's really shaped the way that I approach, working with students as a financial coach at the Financial Success Center. I really try and, understand that everyone has their unique situation. I think that's super important.
Yeah. So I think one takeaway that I hear you saying is that when you're talking about money, it's really important to share your experiences without comparing them to other people's. Yep. For sure. So my next question for you, Jason, when a younger person brings up a financial challenge like rent, debt, or saving, what kinds of questions do you think are most helpful to ask before jumping in with advice?
I would think of a couple questions. The first one would just be what obligations do you have? Like, if you're helping your family out, obviously rent, groceries, how much you spend a month. Like, what is pretty much like the needs, separating between the wants, if that makes sense. Other than that, I think another question would be like, what are your goals? Like, do you want to save for a house? Are you comfortable with just being in an apartment, things of that nature? So I think it's really big on just background and what that person is pursuing personally.
For sure. I was really excited the other day when my kindergartner came home with some homework that said, what is a want versus what is a need? So they're teaching it really young these days,
Definitely.
which is a really good thing. So I think definitely a takeaway is to ask some questions before offering advice, and that could, impact be a more meaningful discussion that we all have. All right, Angela, your turn. So every generation faces its own financial landscape. What do you think is unique about the landscape younger adults are dealing with now? And how can recognizing that shape more empathetic conversations?
So I am a different generation than you all on this podcast, and I would say, I think it's just dramatically harder in general right now. I mean, thinking back 20 or so years ago, when I was out of school, buying my first house that I could afford at that time because housing prices weren't what they were now, based on a salary that was provided to me that made sense in the time that it was happening. I just think that the rate of inflation and the cost of everything just continues to skyrocket, where salaries have tended to plateau for a lot of folks. And so, I'm thinking about you all coming out of school and like, how reasonable would it be for you to buy a house and be able to afford a house and everything that goes along with it that's just outside of the mortgage in itself? So I try to really think about that and think about or remember that, I don't know, life just seemed a little simpler back then than it does now. And at least in the financial landscape, and maybe what is expected of young adults. Like, I feel like maybe parents are still thinking like, well, why can't you do all the things that we were able to do? And it's kind of like, well, because it's a lot less affordable than it was then. And that's just something that's always kind of top of mind, having friends with children in their 20s who are coming out of school and trying to make all of that happen. And it's a struggle.
Would you all like to comment?
Yeah. First off, I just want to say shout out Gen Z. I'll say that I agree with everything she said. It's the cost of living independently right now is higher than it's ever been. And it's not just one thing. It's rent. It's the cost of owning a car. It's student debt. It's insurance. It's groceries. And in addition to the high cost of living, I think that it doesn't help that we're in a hyper-competitive job market. So we have people graduating from college who have taken out loans to get through college who have no way of paying it off because they have no job after college. And in addition to that, I also want to add that comparison is a thief of joy more than ever right now. I think because of the influx of short-form content, we're always comparing ourselves to like hundreds of different people every day. And I think that it's very easy for people my age to feel like they're, behind in life. Whereas maybe people from past generations, I assume you guys were comparing yourself to your coworkers and the people around you. Whereas when you're comparing yourself to hundreds of people who are only showing like the most luxurious parts of their lives, not the credit card debt that comes with it, or maybe it's not even their car that they're posing with. You never know. So it's unrealistic comparisons that are making people feel left behind. And I've seen that in the people I've talked to. So I think it's rough out here for Gen Z, but I think we're doing our best. And a lot of people are figuring it out by going to live with their parents after college, which seems like I'm seeing a lot of right now.
Can I tack onto that
please
really quickly?
do.
I am thankful every single day that we did not have social media when I was in my early
Amen.
20s. Because to your point, we were all excited for each other when we got jobs in our field, or, I mean, there was very little competition because we were comparing in such a small social circle. So we didn't feel like we weren't getting to the right level that we needed to be at a given age, because we weren't exposed to just masses amount of content and people who may be doing the thing, but maybe they're doing the thing just for social media. So I think that is an extra layer of anxiety producing, I don't know what to call it, but that's added on for you all at this day and time, where it's like you can't just focus on yourself because you're inundated with what everybody else in the world is doing, not just perhaps in your friend group.
Definitely. I think for me, I definitely haven't compared myself, which I'm very glad of, but I definitely agree that it has been, with social media, it definitely has been like a big thing, comparing yourself to get rich in 10 days or whatever type of scheme it is. But for me, honestly, it was kind of what you were saying earlier, Mahan, was that the competitive side of things with the job market and everything, it kind of takes away from you even taking out a student loan or even being the worth of going to school, because while you're in school, you have to do 2 to 3 jobs. And when you're at school, you're supposed to have free time to go to like networking events, go get a certification, go look at a speaker, things of that nature. So I think for me, that's definitely more of the side of things where I kind of struggled off in school. But luckily, I didn't take out like any loans or anything like that. It was just more of wasn't able to take the best of all the opportunities that were presented to me.
Sure. So I think as a takeaway to all of those really great points that, understanding today's financial constraints and landscape provides better context for more productive talks, amongst all of our generations. So my last question for the group, can you share a moment when learning more about someone's financial situation or about modern financial tools helped shift your perspective from judgment to understanding? Mahan, I'm going to let you start us off on this one.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer. I think it's, rather than one moment, it's a combination of moments. It's kind of taught me an overarching lesson. For some context, I'm a financial coach at the VACU Financial Success Center. I've worked there for 2 years. It's been my favorite job ever. Shout out Amy, she's my boss. And through that, I've had appointments with students where I give them some action items to go work on after our appointment. And there's been times where they come back for the second appointment and they've made no progress towards any of the action items that I've given them. And that used to leave me very confused. I thought it was apathy or irresponsibility or maybe laziness that was to blame. But I didn't realize the feeling of overwhelmed that people feel when looking at, overdue bills or balances or credit that they have to pay off. And I think I realized that a lot of times it's not a perfect budget that I need to create. It's creating an environment where they feel calm enough and confident enough to tackle those things on head first or head on. And that's been a huge lesson, just because all the technical stuff is good and all the numbers are great. But I think the human side, which you guys emphasize so much, is even more important, and making people feel confident and comfortable has been probably the most important thing that I've learned through that job.
Definitely. To even backtrack on what you were saying is, for me, what I've learned most is perspective, I would say. Definitely not even perspective as in if somebody's making less than somebody else, but perspective, kind of how I was saying earlier. What are your goals? What are you looking to achieve? Things of that nature. Because somebody could be happy just living in like Spain, only paying like $900 rent, and that's it. But somebody else's normal might be 6-figure job or something of that nature. So for me, it's definitely been learning perspectives, and that money is worth to a specific individual differently than any other individual.
I think, again, we have all of these digital tools at our fingertips, which also allow us to see more human experiences out there than, again, just in a smaller social circle. So I think about some of the data that I'm kind of inundated with constantly, and that's like 2 different things. It's, the average family of 4 and what they live on. And then there could be the GoFundMes for people who are, struggling to pay a medical bill. And I think about those kind of situations and how it's much more prevalent to be aware of strangers' situations and the struggles that they're going through, again, because of the age that we live in and all of the digitalness in front of us at every given second. And so I really try to lean in on one of my top strengths of empathy to understand other people's situations and not judge, and just not judge, period. Because we all have, different desires and needs. And again, to your point, lots of people are very happy living a much more modest lifestyle. And particularly they may be able to do that in other countries easily or more easily than they can here. And others are really chasing that almighty dollar and good for them. But I think overall it's again just being aware of different circumstances and different situations and understanding that we all are so very different and finances can be so impactful, whether it's a certain struggle or something else. It just it's really helped me to just kind of again put aside some biases I may have had at an earlier age and really kind of lead with empathy when thinking about other people's situations.
For sure. I'm going to jump in on this one too. So in my role at the VCU Financial Success Center by VACU, I don't meet with students very regularly. That's what Mahan and our group of peer coaches do. But occasionally I'll come across one or two that need an extra level of care or concern. And there was one student that I ended up running into after a presentation one day, and we were talking about her budget and what that looked like. And this student was, spending more than half of her monthly income on a vehicle. So the car payment was over $700. They had obviously the insurance to pay for that. And then they were paying parking to come, drive that to VCU every day. And we talked about, hey, you're spending, close to $1,000 on this vehicle. Probably you could find a much smaller car, much more affordable payment. And then when we dug down into that a little bit deeper, it was because this person had been in an abusive relationship before. And so their car was their safety net to be able to get out of that situation. So for them, it was worth it to them to spend that much money on the car and the expense because it was their way of feeling safe in some really scary situations. And that for me was one of the really big eye-opening moments, that it's not, to your point, Mahan, just about the numbers, right, that are on the spreadsheet or, right in front of us, but more about the human behind it and how that impacts their life and their decisions and their mental health sometimes as well. So I think all of us have learned that, we need to encourage education over judgment so that we can keep everybody on the same page. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having us on the Virginia Credit Union podcast.
Pay That Bill is a podcast designed to entertain and, more importantly, educate. The show is produced by Virginia Credit Union and is developed alongside our award-winning financial education team. We have a library full of free resources available online that can help you on your journey to financial success. If you want to learn more about what we talked about today, check out the links we have in the description of this episode. The information provided in Pay That Bill is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. While we aim to share helpful insights and general strategies, every listener's financial situation is unique. Please consult with a qualified professional for any investment or financial advice. The host and guests of this podcast are not responsible for any outcomes resulting from actions taken based on the content discussed.